On the morning they discharged me from the ICU, my daughter Diane stood in the hospital parking lot and told me I had 10 days to figure out my situation. I'm Ruth Washington, 62 years old, a retired English teacher from San Antonio, Texas. I looked at her, nodded once, and said, "I understand." Then I decided to do something she would never see coming. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please stay with me until the end. The first thing I remember was the sound. Not voices, not light, just sound. A monitor screaming into the void, high-pitched and relentless, like it was angry at me for dying. Then came the burn. They told me later it was the defibrillator paddles, but in that moment it felt like someone had cracked my chest open and poured fire directly into my heart. My body convulsed. I gasped. My lungs filled with air that felt like glass. When I opened my eyes, the fluorescent lights above were cheap and harsh, the kind that buzz if you listen close enough. A nurse leaned over me, her name tag reading Juanita Morales, RN. Her eyes were gentle but worried, the kind of worry that told me the truth before her voice did. "Mrs. Washington," she said softly, her hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now. Just rest. Safe." The word clung to me like an echo I didn't believe. My chest felt as if it had been split open. My mind searched for something solid to hold on to, and 2 names floated to the surface like debris from a shipwreck. "Diane," I rasped through cracked lips. "Kevin. My children. Where are they?" Juanita hesitated. Her hand squeezed my shoulder once, then she shook her head gently. "Don't strain yourself, Mrs. Washington. You need to rest." But that night, after the shift changed, and the ICU ward quieted to nothing but the hum of machines and the occasional beep of monitors, I heard her. Juanita was standing just outside my room, speaking in a low voice on the phone. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. "Yes, ma'am. Your mother stabilized about 4 hours ago," Juanita said. There was a pause. "Yes, she's conscious now. Her vitals are improving." Another pause, longer this time. "Would you like to speak to her?" I held my breath. My heart monitor beeped faster. Juanita's voice fell. "Oh, I see. Okay, I understand. I'll let her know you called." She hung up. I heard her sigh deeply before walking away. I lay there, blinking at the ceiling tiles, my heartbeat hammering harder than it had when the stroke first hit. My own daughter knew I was alive. She knew I had come back from the edge of death, and she had chosen silence. The next morning, a different nurse came in to tidy the small table beside my bed. Her name was Latoya, a young black woman with box braids and kind eyes. She adjusted my water cup, smoothed the blanket, and was about to leave when I saw it. A piece of lined notebook paper, folded in half, tucked carelessly beneath my plastic water pitcher. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Latoya paused at the door, watching me, but said nothing. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was Diane's, neat, controlled, the same script she'd used on thank you cards and grocery lists for years. "Gone to Cancun for 10 days. Hope you are better when we return. D and K." That was it. No flowers, no phone number to reach them, no promise to come back early if things got worse. Just a note, like you'd leave on a refrigerator before heading to the beach. I read it 3 times, waiting for tears to come. They didn't. Instead, a numbness settled over me, thicker and colder than any morphine drip. I realized in that instant that the people I had carried through the storms of their childhoods, through their father's death, through college loans and bad breakups and every scraped knee and broken heart, had boarded a plane to sunshine, while I clung to life by a thread. The ICU hummed with machines around me, but all I heard was silence. A silence louder than any betrayal I could imagine, and I knew right then that if I survived this, everything would change. Let me tell you who I was before that hospital bed, before the flatline and the note and the silence. My name is Ruth Marie Washington. I was born in 1962 in Houston, Texas, the youngest daughter of a Baptist preacher and a school teacher. I married Frank Washington in 1985, a good man who worked as a civil engineer. We had 2 children, Diane in 1986 and Kevin in 1988. Frank died of pancreatic cancer in 2010. He was 52 years old. I was 46. For 15 years after he passed, I raised Diane and Kevin alone. I worked double shifts as an English teacher at Sam Houston High School in San Antonio so they could finish college without debt. I loaned Diane $18,000 when her husband Ryan's landscaping business nearly collapsed in 2019. I co-signed Kevin's first apartment lease when his credit was too low. I thought I was building a family, a foundation. I thought love was a currency that accrued interest over time. I was wrong. 9 days after I flatlined, a hospital volunteer named Gladys Porter wheeled me out of the ICU with a discharge packet and a paper bag of medications. Gladys was a white woman in her early 70s with silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain. "No family picking you up today, honey?" she asked as she helped me into the hospital transport van. I shook my head. "They're traveling." "Well," Gladys said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "you just rest now. You've been through a lot." The ride back to my house on 847 Laurel Canyon Drive was quiet. The driver fiddled with the radio, landing on a gospel station that played Blessed Assurance, while I stared out the window at the streets of San Antonio rolling past. The city looked the same, but I felt like a ghost returning to a place that had already moved on. When the van pulled up to my house, something in my gut clenched. The curtains were different. The ones I'd hung, pale yellow cotton with delicate embroidery, were gone. In their place were heavy gray drapes, modern and cold. The 2 rocking chairs I'd kept on the front porch, the ones Frank and I used to sit in on summer evenings, were missing. I reached for the ceramic frog planter by the front steps, the one that had always held a spare key. My fingers found only damp soil, empty. I stood there for 15 minutes, knocking on my own front door, my knuckles growing sore against the wood. Finally, the door opened. But it wasn't Diane. It wasn't Kevin. It was Ryan Carter, my daughter's husband. He stood there in a faded University of Texas t-shirt, holding a Starbucks cup like he'd been caught trespassing. "Oh," his eyes went wide. Mrs. Washington, you're home sooner than we thought." His voice stammered. His eyes darted past me, searching for an escape route. I stepped forward. He moved aside. I walked into my living room, and it felt like stepping into a stranger's home. The furniture had been rearranged. The cream-colored sofa Frank and I had bought in 1998 was gone, replaced by a sleek gray sectional I'd never seen before. The coffee table, a mahogany piece his father had made by hand, was shoved into the corner, scratched and forgotten. The walls, once painted a warm cream, were now half-finished in a cold charcoal gray. And my wedding photos, 27 years of memories, once proudly displayed on the mantel, were shoved into a cardboard box near the corner, collecting dust. I turned to Ryan. "What is this?" He set his coffee down, hands shaking slightly. "We were just updating things. You know, modernizing." "Modernizing." I repeated the word slowly, tasting the lie in it. My eyes shifted to the dining room table. On it sat a glossy real estate flyer, the kind you see in magazine racks at the grocery store. I picked it up. "Charming southern home, ideal for young families." Below the headline was a photograph of my house, my front porch, my oak tree in the yard, the house I'd lived in for 27 years. Listed price, $385,000. My legs refused to hold me. I sank into one of the dining chairs I'd bought on clearance at Target 15 years ago, and stared at the flyer like it was a death certificate. "Ryan," I said quietly, "why is my house for sale?" He didn't answer. My eyes drifted to the kitchen counter, where a manila folder sat open, papers spilling out like evidence at a crime scene. I stood and walked over, my hands trembling. Inside were copies of legal documents. My name appeared again and again, Ruth Marie Washington. At the top of the stack was a power of attorney form, dated March 14th, 2022. My signature was scrolled across the bottom in blue ink. I remembered that day. I'd just come home from hip surgery, still groggy from anesthesia. Diane had sat beside my bed with a stack of papers, her voice soft and soothing. "Mom, it's just insurance paperwork. In case something happens and you can't make decisions. It's standard. Everyone does it." I'd signed without reading. I trusted her. Now that trust was a weapon pointed at my chest. I flipped through the rest of the folder. There were bank statements from accounts I didn't recognize. Property transfer documents. A letter from Shady Pines Assisted Living Facility confirming a reserved bed for Ruth M. Washington, monthly rate $4,200. My breath caught. They weren't just selling my house. They were erasing me. I needed to know more. I needed to see the full picture. I walked to the pantry where Kevin used to leave his old electronics on the shelf. By some miracle, his iPad was still there, dusty and half-charged. I turned it on. The screen lit up. He was still logged into his iMessage account. I opened the app, and the messages spilled into view like poison. Diane Carter, November 8th, 2024, 10:47 p.m. Once Mom's house sells, we'll finally have breathing room. Ryan's business debt is killing us. We're drowning. Kevin Washington, November 8th, 2024, 10:52 p.m. Yeah, I talked to Shady Pines. They confirmed they have a bed available. $4,200 per month, but we can split it from the sale. Diane Carter, November 8th, 2024, 11:03 p.m. She won't need much space anyway. Just a room with a bed and a TV. She'll be fine. Kevin Washington, November 8th, 2024, 11:15 p.m. About time. No more guilt trips about abandoning her. She never worked a real job anyway. Dad left her everything. It's basically our inheritance. Diane Carter, November 8th, 2024, 11:20 p.m. Exactly. And once she's settled in assisted living, we don't have to worry about her calling us every week asking for help. I read the messages 3 times. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I simply sat there, staring at the screen, as the final pieces of my old life crumbled into dust. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a burden. They thought I had nothing. They were wrong. I sat at the kitchen table in the growing darkness, the iPad still glowing in my hands, and I remembered a name. Samuel Brooks. 20 years ago, he'd been a shy, quiet boy in my 11th grade English class at Sam Houston High School. He stuttered when he read aloud. He sat in the back row and never raised his hand. But when I assigned an essay on Langston Hughes' poem Mother to Son, Samuel turned in 8 pages of the most beautiful, heartbreaking prose I'd ever read from a teenager. He wrote about his own mother, a single woman who cleaned office buildings at night so he could go to college. He wrote about betrayal and resilience and the weight of love that isn't returned. I gave him an A+. I wrote on his paper, "You have a gift, Samuel. Don't let anyone take it from you." Now, 20 years later, Samuel Brooks was a lawyer with a small firm on the west side of San Antonio. I found his number online and called. The phone rang twice before a calm, steady voice answered. "Brooks Legal Services, this is Samuel." "Samuel," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is Ruth Washington. I don't know if you remember me." "Mrs. Washington?" His voice cracked with surprise. "Of course I remember you. You're the reason I became a lawyer. What's wrong?" I told him everything. My voice shook as I described the ICU, the note, the power of attorney, the messages I wasn't supposed to see. He listened without interrupting, without disbelief. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Samuel said, "Mrs. Washington, you're not the first person to come to me with this kind of story, but we can stop it. Can you meet me tomorrow?" "Yes," I said. "Good. Bring everything. Every document you can find. And Mrs. Washington?" "Yes?" "They're going to regret underestimating you." Samuel's office was on the 2nd floor of a small building above a taqueria called El Rincon. The walls were painted beige, and his desk was cluttered with case files. But the moment I walked in, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Samuel was 38 now, tall and lean, with close-cropped hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when I entered and shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Washington, it's good to see you again." I sat down and slid the manila folder across his desk. "This is everything I could find." Samuel opened it and began reading. His eyes moved quickly across the pages, and I watched as his expression shifted from concern to something sharper. He looked up at me. "They overreached," he said. "What do you mean?" "This power of attorney you signed in 2022? It's limited to medical decisions only. You were recovering from surgery, and they had you sign a healthcare proxy form. It does not authorize them to sell your property, access your bank accounts, or make financial decisions on your behalf." I felt the air rush back into my lungs. "So they can't sell my house?" "Not legally, no." He tapped the real estate flyer with one finger. "This listing is fraudulent, and if they've been accessing your accounts using this POA, that's elder financial abuse, a felony in Texas." I sat back in the chair, the weight of 15 years of grief and exhaustion suddenly lifting just a little. Samuel leaned forward. "Mrs. Washington, I'm going to file an emergency petition with the court today to rescind this power of attorney and restore your full legal autonomy. We'll also request a restraining order to prevent them from selling the house or accessing your accounts. If we move now, we can flip this on them before they even know what's happening." I nodded. "Do it." "One more thing," Samuel said. "Are you prepared for this to get ugly? Because once I file, Diane and Kevin are going to know you're fighting back, and people like this don't go quietly." I thought about the note left beside my hospital bed. I thought about the messages on Kevin's iPad. I thought about 15 years of sacrifice, love, and trust that had been repaid with betrayal. "Let it get ugly," I said. "I'm done being quiet." That evening I called a locksmith. A man named Carlos Herrera arrived an hour later with a toolbox and 3 new deadbolts. He changed every lock on the house: front door, back door, garage, while I sat on the porch and watched the sun set over San Antonio. "You want me to keep the old keys?" Carlos asked when he finished. "No," I said. "Throw them away." At exactly 8:17 p.m., Ryan's truck pulled into the driveway. I watched through the Ring doorbell camera as he walked up to the front door, pulled out his key, and tried to unlock it. The key didn't fit. He tried again, then again. Finally, he looked up at the camera. I pressed the intercom button. "Ryan," I said, my voice calm and cold. "Take your tools from the garage. You have 10 minutes. After that, I'm donating them to Goodwill." He stood there, frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Mrs. Washington, 10 minutes, I repeated, starting now." He left without another word, shoulders slumped, defeated. I sat in the dark living room, my heart pounding, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the stroke. Power. 3 days later, Samuel called me. "Mrs. Washington, the court granted the emergency petition. Your power of attorney has been rescinded. You have full legal control again." I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank God." "There's more," Samuel continued. "The district attorney's office reviewed the evidence I submitted. They're opening an investigation into Diane and Kevin for elder financial abuse under Texas Penal Code Section 32.53. If convicted, it's a third-degree felony. They could face up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with something darker. Justice. "What happens now?" I asked. "They'll be served with a summons, and Mrs. Washington, you need to prepare yourself. Once they receive it, they're going to come looking for you." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and a pen. At the top of the page, I wrote, "What I have to lose." The list was short. A house that no longer felt like home. Children who saw me as a burden, a name tied to betrayal. Then I wrote, "What I have to gain." That list was shorter. Freedom. I tore the page out, folded it, and tucked it into my wallet. The next morning, I called a realtor named Margaret Sinclair, a woman I'd met at church years ago. "Margaret," I said, "I need to sell my house, fast, cash buyers only, no contingencies." "Ruth, are you sure? This is a big decision." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." 5 days later, a young couple named Jessica and Tom Nguyen toured the house. They were in their late 20s, expecting their first child, and they fell in love with the oak tree in the backyard. "We'll take it," Jessica said. Cash offer, $385,000. The sale closed in 11 days. On the final day, I sat in the empty living room on a folding chair, eating a peanut butter sandwich off a paper plate. I looked around at the bare walls, the empty spaces where furniture used to be, and I whispered to the house, "This is the last time you'll trap me." I went to Wells Fargo Bank on Fredericksburg Road and asked to close every account that had Diane's or Kevin's name attached. The banker, a middle-aged white woman named Patricia Ann Sullivan, looked concerned. "Mrs. Washington, these are joint accounts. Are you sure you want to close them all?" I said. I opened a new account under a different name, Dorothy Marie Hughes, my maternal grandmother's maiden name. Then I did something I'd only seen in movies. I withdrew $340,000 in cashier's checks and wire transfers, moving the money out of the banking system entirely into a private wealth management account. Patricia looked at me like I was planning to disappear. She wasn't wrong. Before I left San Antonio, I wrote 2 notes, one for Diane, one for Kevin. They were identical. "Thank you for teaching me who you really are, Mother." I left them on the kitchen counter next to Margaret Sinclair's business card. Then I packed my car. I took only what mattered. Frank's watch, a photo album from our wedding, the drawings Diane and Kevin made when they were children, back when they still loved me, the rest. Furniture, dishes, curtains, was junk now. Scraps of a life that had been stolen long before I left. At sunrise on December 3rd, 2024, I slid behind the wheel of my 2011 silver Toyota Corolla, the one with peeling paint and a dent in the bumper. I didn't use GPS. I didn't have a plan. I just drove north, toward a future no one could predict. By dusk, I had crossed into Arkansas, and Ruth Washington began to disappear. By the time I crossed the Arkansas state line, the sun had set completely. My headlights cut through the darkness of Highway 67, illuminating nothing but pine trees and the occasional gas station. I'd been driving for 12 hours straight, stopping only once for coffee and a bathroom break. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. My back screamed from sitting too long. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Because if I stopped, I might think about what I'd done. I might think about Diane's face when she found the note. I might think about Kevin standing in that empty house, realizing his mother had vanished like smoke. And if I thought about those things, I might turn around. So I drove. It was nearly midnight when I saw the sign. Welcome to Fairhaven, Arkansas, a place to rest. Population 5,847. The town appeared like something out of a postcard from 1985. Main Street was barely 3 blocks long. A single stoplight blinked yellow. I passed a library with dark windows, a diner called Rosie's Kitchen with a closed sign, a hardware store, and a gas station that looked like it had been there since the 1950s. Everything was closed. Everything was quiet. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I pulled into the parking lot of a small motel called the Pines Inn, a 1-story building with faded blue paint and a neon vacancy sign that flickered. The night clerk was a thin white man in his 60s, reading a Louis L'Amour paperback behind bulletproof glass. "Need a room?" he asked without looking up. "Yes, please." "How many nights?" I paused. "1, for now." He slid a registration card through the slot. "Cash or card?" "Cash." He looked up then, studying me for the first time. I must have looked like exactly what I was, a woman on the run. But all he said was, $45. Checkout's at 11. I paid. He handed me a key attached to a plastic tag marked Room 7. "Breakfast is coffee and donuts in the lobby at 6, he said. "Sleep well, ma'am." I walked to my room, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. It smelled like cigarettes and old carpet. The bedspread was threadbare. The TV was from 2005. The bathroom had a rust stain in the sink. It was perfect. I locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time since I'd flatlined in that ICU, I let myself cry. I spent the first 3 days in Fairhaven doing nothing but sleeping and walking. I'd wake up at dawn, make instant coffee in the motel room using the 2-cup maker, and then walk the perimeter of the town like I was learning the boundaries of my new life. Fairhaven was small enough that you could walk from one end to the other in 20 minutes. The people were polite, but not intrusive. When I passed someone on the sidewalk, they'd nod and say, "Morning," but they didn't ask questions. On the 4th day, I walked into Fairhaven Public Library. It was a small brick building with tall windows and the smell of old books, the kind of library that still used card catalogs alongside computers. Inside there were maybe a dozen people, elderly men reading newspapers, a young mother with 2 children in the picture book section, a teenager doing homework at a corner table. Behind the circulation desk sat a white woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and reading glasses on a beaded chain. Her name tag read Barbara Stone, head librarian. She looked up when I approached and smiled warmly. "Can I help you find something?" "Actually," I said, "I was wondering if you accept volunteers." Barbara's smile widened. "We always need help. Are you new to Fairhaven?" "Yes, ma'am. I just moved here a few days ago." "Well, welcome. What's your name?" I hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Dorothy Hughes." The lie came out smooth as glass. No stumble, no doubt. Dorothy Marie Hughes. My grandmother's name. The woman who raised me when my mother worked double shifts. The woman who taught me to read, to cook, to survive. If I had to become someone else, I wanted to become her. "It's nice to meet you, Dorothy," Barbara said. "Where are you from?" "Roanoke, Virginia." Another lie, but one I'd rehearsed. I'm recently widowed, retired from library work. I just needed a change of scenery. Barbara's expression softened with sympathy. I'm so sorry for your loss. My husband passed 6 years ago. I understand that need to start fresh. She didn't ask more questions. She didn't press. Instead, she said, "We'd love to have you volunteer. Can you start tomorrow?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like that very much." On my 5th day in Fairhaven, I knew I couldn't stay at the Pines Inn forever. I needed something more permanent, something cheap, something off the grid. I walked into Fletcher's Hardware and Feed, a cluttered store that smelled like sawdust and motor oil. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 60s with gray hair, a weathered face, and a Vietnam veteran's cap. His name tag read Jim Fletcher, owner. "Help you?" he asked, not unkindly. "I'm looking for a place to rent," I said. "Something small. I can pay cash." Jim looked at me over his reading glasses. "You're the new lady volunteering at the library." It wasn't a question. "Word travels fast," I said. "It's a small town." He scratched his chin. "I got a trailer out back. Used to rent it to a fisherman, but he moved to Florida last month. It's nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, kitchenette, bathroom, $650 a month, first and last month up front. Cash only, no lease." "Does it have heat and running water?" "Yes, ma'am." "I'll take it." Jim raised an eyebrow. "Don't you want to see it first?" "If it has 4 walls and a door that locks, it's perfect." He chuckled and pulled a key from a drawer. "Follow me." The trailer sat behind the hardware store, partially hidden by a row of pine trees. It was old, maybe 30 years old, with faded white siding and a small wooden deck. Inside it was exactly as Jim described. 1 bedroom with a double bed and a closet, a tiny bathroom with a shower stall, and a kitchenette with a 2-burner stove and a mini fridge. The floor creaked. The curtains were yellowed. The whole place was maybe 400 square feet. It was exactly what I needed. "I'll take it," I said again. Jim nodded. "You smoke?" "No, sir." "Good. Cash or check?" "Cash." I counted out $1,300 from the envelope in my purse. Jim took it without counting, handed me the key, and said, "Welcome to Fairhaven, Mrs. Hughes." That night I moved my things from the motel to the trailer. It took exactly 1 trip. I lay on the thin mattress, boxes stacked around me like a fortress, and listened to the crickets outside the window. I waited for the fear to come, the regret, the panic. Instead, I felt relief. For the first time since my heart had stopped, I could breathe without wondering who was waiting to bury me. Every night before I went to sleep, I opened a small spiral notebook and wrote, "Page 1, name, Dorothy Marie Hughes, age 62, from Roanoke, Virginia. Occupation, retired librarian. Marital status, widow. Husband died 2022. Children, none reason for moving. Fresh start after loss." Page 2. Do not mention San Antonio. Do not mention Diane or Kevin. Do not mention teaching career. Do not mention Frank's death in 2010. Do not use the name Ruth. I wrote and rewrote these details until they were burned into my memory. Until Dorothy Hughes felt more real than Ruth Washington ever had. And slowly she did. The library became my anchor. I volunteered Tuesday and Thursday mornings, shelving books, repairing damaged spines with tape and glue, and organizing the children's section. Barbara treated me like I'd worked there for years, trusting me with keys and responsibilities. It was on my 2nd Thursday that I met Lorraine Hayes. She came in just after lunch, a white woman in her mid-30s with tired eyes and blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She wore a waitress uniform from Rosie's Kitchen, black pants, white button-up shirt, name tag pinned to her chest. Behind her trailed a small boy, maybe 8 years old, with brown hair and freckles. He clutched a stack of worn comic books against his chest. Lorraine approached the desk where I was working. "Excuse me, is Barbara around?" "She's at a meeting with the town council," I said. "Can I help you?" Lorraine hesitated. "I just wanted to ask if it's okay if Tyler does his homework here after school. I work the evening shift at the diner, and I don't like him being home alone." I looked at the boy, Tyler. He was staring at a poster on the wall advertising a summer reading program from 2 years ago. "Of course it's okay," I said. "We'd love to have him." Lorraine's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you. I'll pick him up at 9 when my shift ends." "No rush?" I said. "What grade are you in, Tyler?" The boy looked up at me shyly. "3rd. What's your favorite subject? He shrugged. I like reading, but I'm not good at math. Well, I said, smiling, I happen to be very good at math. If you need help, you just ask. Tyler's face lit up. Really? Really. And that's how it started. Over the next few weeks, Tyler became a regular fixture at the library. He'd arrive every afternoon at 3:30, backpack slung over one shoulder, and head straight for the corner table I'd started keeping clear for him. I'd help him with his homework, multiplication tables, reading comprehension, spelling words. When he finished, he'd read comic books until his mother came to pick him up. Lorraine always arrived at exactly 9:05 p.m., smelling like grease and coffee, exhausted but grateful. One evening in late December, she lingered after Tyler had gone to wash his hands in the bathroom. Mrs. Hughes, she said quietly, I just want to thank you. Tyler talks about you all the time. You're the first person who's treated him like he matters since we moved here. I looked up from the book cart I was organizing. He's a sweet boy. Smart, too. Lorraine smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. His father died 3 years ago. Car accident. Tyler was only 5. I'm so sorry. She nodded. We left Georgia right after. Needed a fresh start. Fair Haven seemed far enough away that no one would ask questions. I understood exactly what she meant. Sometimes, I said carefully, running is the only way to survive. Lorraine looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw recognition in her eyes. The kind of recognition that happens between two people who've both been broken and glued themselves back together in the dark. Yeah, she said softly. Sometimes it is. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in early January. Tyler was struggling with a math worksheet, long division, and I was sitting beside him, walking him through the steps. Okay, I said, if you divide 144 by 12, what do you get? Tyler chewed on his pencil eraser, thinking hard. 12? Exactly. See? You got it. His face broke into a huge grin. He threw his arms around me in an impulsive hug. Thanks, Grandma Dorothy. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Tyler pulled back, suddenly embarrassed. I mean, Mrs. Hughes, sorry. I looked at this little boy with freckles and gap-toothed smile, and I thought about Kevin at that age. Kevin, who used to run to me after school and show me every drawing, every spelling test, every rock he found interesting. Kevin, who now saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. You can call me Grandma Dorothy, I said. If you want to. Really? Really. Tyler hugged me again, and I held him close, blinking back tears. January slipped into February, and a routine emerged. Mornings, wake at 6 a.m., make coffee, sit on the small deck of the trailer and watch the sunrise through the pine trees. 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., volunteer at the library, Tuesday and Thursday. On other days, walk Main Street, visit the used bookstore, or sit in Rosie's kitchen and read. 3:30 p.m., Tyler arrives. Help with homework. Share stories. Teach him things his teachers haven't. Poetry, history, the joy of words. 9 p.m., Lorraine picks up Tyler. We talk for 10 minutes. Nothing deep. Just two women who understand each other. Night. Write in the notebook. Remind myself who I am now. Who I can never be again. The pain about Diane and Kevin didn't disappear. It lived in my chest like a scar that ached when it rained. But it became manageable. Survivable. I kept a shoebox under my bed with 3 things inside. Frank's watch. A photo of Diane and Kevin from 1995, when they were still small and still loved me. The note they'd left in the ICU, I didn't open it often, but knowing it was there felt important. A reminder of what I'd survived. One night in mid-February, after Tyler had fallen asleep in Lorraine's car, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We went to Rosie's kitchen, even though Lorraine had just finished a shift there. The late-night waitress, a woman named Shelley, brought us 2 cups of bad diner coffee and a slice of apple pie to share. Lorraine stirred sugar into her cup and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why Fair Haven?" I took a sip of coffee, buying time. It seemed like a good place to disappear. Lorraine nodded slowly. "That's why I came here too." "You said you left Georgia after your husband died." "Yeah." She stared into her coffee. "His name was Derek. We were high school sweethearts. Got married when I was 19. She paused. He started drinking when Tyler was 2. By the time Tyler was 4, Derek was different, mean. I stayed quiet, letting her talk. He hit me, Lorraine said flatly. Never Tyler, just me. I left 3 times, went back 3 times, and then one night he got in his truck drunk and wrapped it around a telephone pole at 80 miles an hour. I'm sorry. I'm not. Her voice was hard. I know I'm supposed to be, but I'm not. When the police came to tell me, all I felt was relief. She looked up at me. Does that make me a bad person? No, I said. It makes you a survivor. Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. After he died, his family tried to take Tyler from me, said I was an unfit mother because I drove him to drink. So I changed our last name from Morrison to Hayes, packed everything I owned, and drove until I found a place where nobody knew us. How long have you been here? 2 years. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. I don't have family. No parents, no siblings, just Tyler. And then you showed up and... I don't know. It felt like I finally found someone who understands. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're not alone anymore, I said. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew. We were 2 women running from the past, building something new in the ruins. It happened on a Saturday in late February. I was at the post office mailing a birthday card to Tyler. His 9th birthday was coming up, when a woman behind me in line said, "Excuse me, aren't you Ruth Washington?" My blood turned to ice. I turned around slowly. The woman was white, maybe 45, with short brown hair and a concerned expression. I'm sorry, I said carefully. Ruth Washington, you taught at Sam Houston High School in San Antonio, right? My cousin Julie was in your class in 2008. She always talked about you. I forced a polite smile. I'm afraid you have me confused with someone else. My name is Dorothy Hughes. The woman frowned, studying my face. You look just like her. I get that a lot, I said lightly. Must be one of those faces. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Sorry, my mistake. I paid for the postage, left the post office, and walked back to my trailer with my heart pounding. That night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long time. Ruth Washington had short natural hair, glasses, and wore cardigans. Dorothy Hughes needed to look different. The next day, I went to a salon in the next town over and asked them to dye my hair. Not a dramatic change, just darker with auburn tones. I bought contact lenses instead of glasses. I started wearing brighter colors. Small changes, but enough. On March 15th, Lorraine threw Tyler a birthday party at the VFW Hall on the edge of town. She'd rented the back room for 2 hours, decorated it with streamers and balloons from the dollar store, and invited Tyler's entire 3rd grade class, all 12 of them. I helped her set up folding tables, arrange paper plates, and light 9 candles on a homemade chocolate cake. When the kids arrived, chaos erupted. Running, screaming, cake, presents. Tyler's face was pure joy. I sat at a side table watching him open gifts, Lego sets, comic books, a remote control car, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Happiness. Not the bittersweet kind. Just happiness. Tyler ran over and grabbed my hand. Grandma Dorothy, come help me open this one. I followed him to the gift table. One of the mothers, a blonde woman in her early 30s named Ashley Bennett, was filming everything on her phone. This is so sweet, Ashley said, filming Tyler and me together. He's so lucky to have you. I smiled for the camera, helped Tyler read the card on his present, and thought nothing of it. It was just a birthday party, just a harmless video. 3 days later, Lorraine burst into the library at 10 a.m., her face pale, holding her phone like it was a grenade. Dorothy, she whispered urgently, you need to see this. We went to the back office where Barbara kept her desk. Lorraine locked the door and handed me her phone. On the screen was a TikTok video. The clip showed me and Tyler at the birthday party. I was helping him open the remote control car, smiling, wearing a paper party hat. The caption read, Birthday boy with his honorary grandma, #blessings, #family. That video had 847 likes, but it had been reposted. Lorraine scrolled down. A parenting blog called Heartwarming Moments Daily had shared it with 2.3 million followers. And then someone else had shared it. A TikTok user named @Detective Danny with 50,000 followers had stitched the video with her own commentary. Her video showed my face zoomed in, side by side with an old news photo from San Antonio. The caption, "Wait, isn't this the Texas grandma who disappeared after her kids tried to sell her house? She changed her name. She's in Arkansas, building a new family. Grandma Ghost is alive. Hashtag true crime. Hashtag elder abuse. Hashtag found." That video had 2.8 million views. And climbing. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "Oh God," I whispered. Lorraine grabbed my hand. "Dorothy, Ruth, whoever you are, we need to figure out what to do." I scrolled through the comments. "She's a legend. I do the same thing. This is elder abuse. Her kids should be in jail. She abandoned her family. Narcissist behavior. Team Grandma all the way. Wait, she faked her death? That's insane." "No, she didn't fake her death. She just left. And good for her." My hands shook. In 48 hours, the video had been shared to Facebook, Instagram, Reddit. Someone had started a podcast about me. A mommy blogger wrote an article titled "The Grandma Who Vanished, Why We're All Rooting for Her." My face was everywhere, and if the world could see me, then Diane could see me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the small table in my trailer, notebook open, writing and rewriting my cover story as if that could protect me. Dorothy Hughes, retired librarian, widowed 2022, no children, Roanoke, Virginia. The lies felt paper thin now, transparent. Lorraine had offered to let me stay at her apartment, but I refused. I needed to be alone. I needed to think. By morning, the video had 4.7 million views. Someone had created a subreddit, r/Grandma Ghost. Someone else had made merchandise, t-shirts that said "I stand with Ruth." I was a meme, a symbol, a story, but I was also exposed. 2 days after the video went viral, I saw it. A silver Toyota Camry with Texas license plates parked across the street from the library. I was inside, shelving books in the history section, when I glanced out the window and saw the car. It had been circling the block twice, slowly, like a shark testing shallow water. Then it parked. The driver's door opened, and Diane Carter stepped out. My daughter. She looked older than I remembered, smaller. She wore jeans, a gray cardigan, and carried a paper coffee cup in her hand. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray she hadn't bothered to cover. She stood by the car for a moment, scanning the sidewalk, the library entrance, the street. Then her eyes found the window, found me. Even from 30 feet away, I saw her face change, saw the recognition, saw the confirmation that I was real, that I was here, that I was alive. I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering. Barbara appeared beside me. "Dorothy? Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." My voice cracked. "I need to step outside for a moment." "Of course. Take your time." I walked to the front door on legs that felt like they might give out. I pushed it open and stepped onto the sidewalk. Diane stood 20 feet away, frozen. We stared at each other across the space between us, a distance that felt wider than miles. And then she spoke. One word. "Mom." The word hung in the air between us like smoke. Mom. For a moment, something old and primal stirred inside me. The urge to comfort, to forgive, to be the mother I'd always been, the one who smoothed over conflicts, who made everything okay, who sacrificed pieces of herself to keep the peace. But that woman had died in the ICU. I stood on the library steps, my hands steady at my sides, and said nothing. Diane took a hesitant step forward. Her coffee cup trembled in her hand. "Please don't walk away. Let me explain." I descended the steps slowly, deliberately. When I reached the sidewalk, I stopped 6 feet from her, close enough to see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her cardigan hung loose on her frame like she'd lost weight. "Explain what?" My voice came out flat, emotionless. "Explain the note you left while I was dying. Explain the house you tried to sell. Explain the assisted living facility you'd already reserved." Diane flinched like I'd slapped her. Tears welled in her eyes. "We didn't know it was that bad. We thought you were stable. We thought—" I laughed. It was an ugly sound, bitter and sharp. "You knew exactly how bad it was. The hospital called you. They told you I'd flatlined. They asked if you wanted to speak to me, and you said no." "That's not—" Her voice broke. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back. "You want to talk about fair?" I worked double shifts for 15 years after your father died so you could finish college without debt. I loaned you $18,000 when Ryan's business was failing. I co-signed Kevin's lease when no one else would. And when I needed you, when I was alone in a hospital bed wondering if I'd live to see another day, you went to Cancun. Diane's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I was scared, Mom. Scared to watch you get weak. Scared to watch you die like Dad did. I made mistakes. You made choices, I corrected. And now I'm making mine. She reached out, hand extended like she might touch my arm. I didn't move, but something in my eyes must have stopped her because her hand fell back to her side. Where have you been? She whispered. We've been looking for you for months. Kevin thought maybe we didn't know if you were alive. I was alive, I said. I just wasn't yours anymore. Mom, please. Her voice cracked completely now. I'm sorry. We're sorry. We were wrong. We were so wrong. Can we try again? Can we fix this? I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through colic and nightmares, taught to read and drive and be strong, and I felt nothing but distance. I already held my own funeral, I said quietly. You just weren't invited. Diane's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. I'm not coming back, Diane. I found a new life here, one that doesn't require pretending we were ever okay. But we're family. Family, I interrupted, are the people who show up when you're weak. Family is the hand that steadies you when you stumble. Family is the voice that answers when you call. I paused. You taught me that you're not my family anymore. I turned and walked back toward the library. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough for her to know this wasn't a performance. It was closure. Behind me, I heard Diane sob, a raw, broken sound that might have shattered me 6 months ago, but I didn't look back. I found Lorraine waiting inside the library, standing by the circulation desk with Barbara. Both women looked at me with concern. Dorothy? Barbara asked gently. Who was that woman? I opened my mouth and the lie almost came out automatically, but I was tired, so tired of lying. My daughter, I said. Barbara's eyes widened. I thought you said you didn't have children. I lied. I looked at Lorraine. My real name is Ruth Washington. I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I had a stroke in November. While I was in the ICU, my children tried to sell my house and put me in assisted living. So I disappeared. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. Then Lorraine stepped forward and hugged me. I know, she said into my shoulder. I pulled back. What? I saw the video 3 days ago. I recognized you. She smiled sadly. I didn't say anything because I figured if you were running, you had a good reason. Barbara looked between us, processing. Finally, she said, Dorothy, Ruth, whoever you want to be, you're safe here. And you're still welcome at this library every Tuesday and Thursday if you want to be. I felt something break inside my chest, not painfully, but like a dam releasing. Thank you, I whispered. 3 weeks passed. Diane didn't return. I waited for her to knock on my trailer door, to show up at the library, to force another confrontation. But she didn't. Instead, on a Tuesday afternoon in early April, a letter arrived. It was slipped through the book return slot at the library, in an envelope with my name, Dorothy, written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Kevin's. I stared at the envelope for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. At the top was my own handwriting, shaky, desperate letters I'd scrawled in the ICU when I thought I was dying. If I don't wake up, please forgive me. If I do, please come. I'm scared. I'd forgotten I wrote that. The morphine had made everything hazy, but there it was, my plea from the edge of death. In the margins, Kevin had written his own message in slanted, messy script. We didn't know how bad it was. I thought Diane would go. I thought you'd understand. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? Please. Kevin. At the bottom was an email address. Quashington1988@gmail.com. I sat in the back office of the library for 2 hours, staring at that letter. Finally, I opened my laptop and typed an email. Subject: 1 chance. Kevin, 1 visit. No cameras, no excuses. Bring the letter. Oakwood Cemetery, Fairhaven. Saturday, 2 p.m. Mother, I hit send before I could change my mind. Oakwood Cemetery sat on the eastern edge of Fair Haven, a quiet place with old oak trees and headstones dating back to the 1800s. There was a section in the back where newer graves were marked with simple flat stones. I'd walked through it once before during one of my early days in town. I'd even found a headstone I liked, a simple granite marker under a weeping willow that read, Frank Hughes, beloved husband, 1960 to 2022. It wasn't real. Frank Washington had died in 2010 and was buried in San Antonio. But Dorothy Hughes needed a past, and this grave provided it. I sat on a stone bench near that marker on Saturday at 1:55 p.m., waiting. At exactly 2 p.m., a car pulled into the cemetery entrance. Kevin got out. He looked terrible, thinner than I remembered. His hair was longer, unkempt. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt and jeans, and he carried a canvas tote bag like a shield. For a moment, he looked like the boy he used to be, the one who shuffled into kindergarten nervous and wide-eyed, clutching my hand, the one who brought me dandelions and called them flowers. But when he walked closer, I saw the man who had betrayed me. He stopped 10 feet away, uncertain. "Mom," he said quietly. "Kevin." "Can I sit?" I gestured to the bench. He sat down, leaving 2 feet of space between us, and set the tote bag at his feet. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Kevin said, "I brought the letter, like you asked." He pulled it from the bag, my desperate note from the ICU, and held it in trembling hands. "Why did you keep it?" I asked. "Because it was the last time you needed me, and I wasn't there." His voice cracked. "I've read it every day since you disappeared. Every single day." I looked at him, this man who was my son and also a stranger, and waited. "I didn't know how to deal with watching you get weak," Kevin said. "Dad died slow. Cancer ate him from the inside for 2 years. I watched him go from strong to frail to gone. And when you had the stroke, all I could think was not again. I can't watch this again. So you left." "So I left." He wiped his eyes roughly. I convinced myself it was practical, that we were being smart, that moving fast would make it easier. The house, the assisted living, all of it. I told myself we were helping you. "Helping me?" My voice was ice. "By selling my home without my permission? By planning to lock me away?" "I know," the words burst out of him. "I know it was wrong. I know we were selfish and cruel and—" He broke down completely, shoulders shaking with sobs. "You think I don't hate myself for it? You think I sleep at night? I wake up every morning and remember what we did to you. What I did." I watched him cry and felt nothing but emptiness. "I think you sleep better than I did," I said, wondering why my own children couldn't hold my hand while I fought for breath. Kevin looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Can I come back? Can we try again? I'll do anything. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Just please, please don't shut me out forever." I had prepared for this moment. I'd rehearsed it in my mind 100 times. "That part of me, Kevin," I said slowly, "the part that was your mother, you already buried. And this time I chose the funeral. Mom, I loved you the best I could. I gave you everything I had, and it wasn't enough to make you stay when I needed you most." I stood up. "So I'm letting you go." Kevin stood too, reaching for me. "Please, please don't." I stepped back. Not harsh, just final. "Goodbye, Kevin." I walked away through the cemetery, past the headstones of strangers and the fake grave of Frank Hughes, and I didn't look back. Behind me, Kevin's sobs echoed through the trees, but they weren't mine to carry anymore. That night, I sat at the small table in my trailer with a fresh piece of notebook paper. At the top, I wrote, "You did it. You got out." I made 2 lists. What I lost. A house that became a prison. The name Ruth Washington. Children who loved the idea of me but not the reality. The fantasy of unconditional family love. What I gained. Quiet mornings without fear. Honest friendships. Lorraine, Barbara. Tyler's laughter, given freely. The ability to choose who deserves my love. Peace. When I finished, I folded the paper and slid it into the shoebox under my bed. The box also held Frank's watch. One photograph of Diane and Kevin from 1995, when they were small and still believed I could do anything. Tyler's birthday card, handmade with crayon drawings. The note from the ICU, gone to Cancun for 10 days. I closed the box, not with anger, but with acceptance. In mid-May, I received a call from Samuel Brooks. "Mrs. Washington," he said, "the district attorney's case has concluded. Diane and Kevin have agreed to a plea deal." "What does that mean?" "They're pleading guilty to attempted elder financial exploitation, a Class E felony in Texas. The terms are restitution of $28,000 to cover your legal fees and costs, 200 hours of community service each, 3 years of probation, no contact with you unless you explicitly permit it. Their names will be on a state registry for elder abuse." I was quiet for a long time. "Mrs. Washington, are you there?" "Yes," I said. "I'm here." "Do you want to contest the plea? Push for jail time?" "You have that right." I thought about Diane's face in the library parking lot, Kevin's sobs in the cemetery. "No," I said. "Let it end." "All right. I'll file the paperwork accepting the plea. Is there anything else you need from me?" "No, Samuel. Thank you. For everything." "Mrs. Washington, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" I looked around my tiny trailer, the single hot plate, the thrift store furniture, the view of pine trees through the window. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." On the last Friday in May, Tyler starred in his 3rd grade production of The Giving Tree. Lorraine had to work the dinner shift at Rosie's Kitchen, so I went in her place. The school auditorium was packed with parents, grandparents, and siblings. I sat in the front row, clutching a bouquet of daisies I'd bought at the grocery store. When Tyler walked onto the stage dressed as a tree, covered in brown fabric with paper leaves pinned to his arms, his eyes scanned the audience nervously. When he found me, his whole face lit up. He delivered his lines perfectly. "Come, boy, climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and eat apples and play in my shade and be happy." After the play, Tyler ran to me and threw his arms around my waist. "Did you like it, Grandma Dorothy?" "You were perfect," I said, handing him the daisies. "These are for me?" "Of course they're for you." He buried his face in the flowers, grinning. "You're the best grandma ever." My throat tightened. "You're the best Tyler ever." That night, after Tyler had gone to bed, Lorraine invited me to her apartment for wine. It was a small 2-bedroom place above the hardware store, decorated with mismatched furniture and Tyler's artwork taped to every wall. We sat on her worn couch, drinking cheap Chardonnay from coffee mugs. "Dorothy, Ruth, whatever you want me to call you," Lorraine said. "I need you to know that I don't care. I don't care to know that I don't care. I don't care what your real name is or where you came from or what you're running from. You're the first person who didn't judge me for leaving Derek. You taught Tyler to love reading again. You showed up." She looked up at me, eyes shining. "You're family to us. Real family." I set down my mug and took her hand. "You're family to me too," I said. We sat there in comfortable silence. 2 women who'd been broken by the people who were supposed to love them most, who'd found each other in the ruins and built something new. By December, I'd been Dorothy Hughes for a full year. On Thanksgiving, Barbara from the library hosted a community dinner at the VFW Hall for anyone who didn't have family nearby. 30 people showed up. Jim Fletcher and his veteran friends, elderly widows from the quilting circle, young couples who'd just moved to town, and a handful of teenagers whose parents were working holiday shifts. I helped Barbara set up folding tables and lay out dishes: turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, pumpkin pie donated by Rosie's Kitchen. Lorraine and Tyler sat beside me. Barbara sat across from us. Jim Fletcher said a simple grace: "For food, for friendship, for second chances. Amen." As we ate, Tyler told everyone about the A he'd gotten on his science project. Lorraine shared that she'd been promoted to shift manager. Barbara announced the library had received a grant for new children's books. No one asked me about my past. No one questioned my story. I was simply Dorothy, a retired librarian who volunteered at the library and helped a little boy with his homework. And it was enough. On a cold night in early December, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote one final letter. "Dear Diane and Kevin, I'm not writing to forgive you. I'm not writing to punish you either. I'm writing because I need you to understand something I've learned. Family is not the blood in your veins. It's the people who show up when you're weak. It's the hand that steadies you when you stumble. It's the voice that answers when you call. You taught me that I raised you to survive, but I forgot to teach you to love unconditionally. Maybe that was my failure too. I found a new life now. A small town, a new name, people who care without keeping score. I'm not Ruth Washington anymore. She died in that ICU. What's left is someone lighter, freer. I won't tell you where I am. Not because I hate you, but because I finally learned to protect myself. If you truly want to make amends, don't look for me. Instead, be the people I once believed you were. Be kind. Show up for others. Break the cycle. Maybe one day, years from now, we'll meet again as strangers who once knew each other. And maybe that will be enough. Your mother, Ruth. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and then did something unexpected. I burned it. I watched the paper curl and blacken in the kitchen sink, the words turning to ash, and I felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. They didn't need my forgiveness. I didn't need their redemption. We simply needed to let each other go. On a bright Saturday in March, Fairhaven Library held a dedication ceremony. Barbara had spent months fundraising and renovating the children's section. Now it was complete. New carpets, fresh paint, comfortable beanbag chairs, and shelves full of books purchased with the grant money. A small plaque was mounted on the wall. The Dorothy Hughes Reading Corner, in gratitude for dedication, kindness, and love of learning, established March 2026. I stood in front of it, surrounded by Barbara, Lorraine, Tyler, Jim Fletcher, and 24 library patrons. "Dorothy," Barbara said, "would you do the honors?" She handed me a pair of scissors and a ribbon stretched across the entrance. I cut the ribbon. Everyone applauded. Tyler grabbed my hand and dragged me to the new reading corner. "Come on, Grandma Dorothy. You have to read us a story." I sat in the wooden rocking chair Barbara had donated, and a dozen children gathered around me on the floor. I opened a copy of Where the Wild Things Are and began to read, and for the first time in 62 years, I felt complete. That night, alone in my trailer, I opened the shoebox under the bed one more time. I pulled out the photograph of Diane and Kevin from 1995. They were 7 and 5 years old, wearing matching denim overalls, standing in front of our old house on Laurel Canyon Drive. Diane held a dandelion. Kevin was missing his 2 front teeth. They looked so small, so innocent, so sure that their mother could fix anything. I ran my finger gently over their faces. "I loved you the best I could," I whispered. "I hope one day you understand." I placed the photo back in the box, closed the lid, and slid it under the bed. The next morning, I woke at 6 a.m. as always. I made coffee in the small kitchenette, wrapped myself in Frank's old cardigan, and stepped onto the wooden deck of the trailer. The sun was rising through the pine trees, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Birds sang. The air smelled like rain coming. From the hardware store below, I heard Jim opening up shop, the familiar jingle of his keys. Across the street, Lorraine's apartment light flickered on. A minute later, Tyler appeared at the window, waving at me. I waved back. My phone buzzed with a text from Barbara. "Don't forget book club tonight at 6. We're discussing Beloved." I smiled and texted back, "I'll bring cookies." This was my life now. Small, quiet, mine.